To me, and I'm glad you brought this up, money has many characteristics. I have a list of 12. I don't have it handy, but there's a list of 12. Most of them I've got from my research. Some I've added to myself, to the list. Money, and people confuse the characteristics or attributes of money for what it does. Money does one thing, and only one thing. It facilitates an indirect transaction. It's what took humanity from direct barter to indirect exchanges, which meant the more and more we could do indirect transactions, the more and more people could specialize. And when they specialized, they got better at what they did, made better things, and had more. When you talk about money, to me, the prime thing to think about is, what is its function?
Thanks for watching this RTD interview. Don't forget to pick up your RTD Scary George round, only available at stbullion.com. Now enjoy this interview. Thanks for tuning in to this Rethinking the Dollar interview. Today I'm excited to have returning guest, Mr. Alan Myers. He's a CPA, forensic accountant, and a student of our monetary system. And today Alan is joining us to share his thoughts on the global economy, the banking sector, and a variety of other subject matter. So Alan Myers, welcome back to Rethinking the Dollar.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to have a chat with you about banking, the Fed, money creation. Absolutely happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you. And so looking forward to getting your thoughts on a variety of subject matter. And so before we get started, for those that do not know Alan Myers, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you've arrived at this point in your career?
Certainly. I'm a CPA, forensic accountant. Forensic accountant is a type of accountant who is given tons of paper or electronic files, and you have to figure out where the money came from and where it went. You hunt, you dig, you sort, you analyze, you evaluate, and eventually explain. I've been at this study for almost 9 years. What got me started was a massive book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I can't tell you where in the pages of that book I woke up, but it is within the pages of that book I woke up. What I've learned since then is not in my education. It's out there. It's laying on the tables if you know where to go look. One of my new sayings is, if you look where no one else has looked, you will see what no one else has seen. And that is what I've been doing. The whole study of the Federal Reserve System, banking, money, it may sound complex, intricate. Oh, I need a degree in economics. Couldn't be farther from the truth. What I write on and speak on, I say it this way. It's ABC, not Shakespeare. It's 1, 2, 3, not calculus. Basically, anybody can get this. And once you understand the basics of banking, how it actually operates, you're going to know what needs to be changed, how to change it, and what benefits are going to be returned to the people. And you'll also understand really what is wrong with our monetary system. That's my background.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate you for sharing that. So let's get right into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to be discussing. So I'm curious to find out, as always, very first thought, at this current point, halfway through the year 2019, a lot of things are unfolding in our monetary system with the banking sector, especially, what concerns Alan Myers the most? What are you keeping an eye on? What are you really making sure you don't miss?
I track most of what I can. What I am beginning to do is I'm reading more, and I'm finding out that what is being written out in articles, documents, what's being said in videos about the monetary system or about money is in many important ways factually incorrect. It's misleading. I always look to see if anybody has figured out what I've figured out. I do stay, in touch, let's say, with the national debt. For example, our treasury debt, national debt, is $22+ trillion. Now, most people understand trillion as a number. They may not know it's 1 followed by 12 zeros. But the problem is trillion, we don't understand this in what I call understandable units. And people can say, well, you can stack bills, from here to the moon. We can't process that. So let me give you a trillion in what I call 3 understandable units. Seconds. What's a second? Snap of a finger, right? A trillion seconds. Mike, if you could live a trillion seconds, you'd live to be 31,709 years old. That's 1 trillion. Okay, that's not going to happen. So let's say you're an athletic man. You decide you want to walk 1 trillion inches. Take a look at a ruler, see how big an inch is. It isn't much. To walk 1 trillion inches, you'd have to walk a distance equal to about 633 times around the Earth at the equator. 1 lap is just under 25,000 miles. Okay, that's not going to happen. Final. You want to be the first one to get the trillion-mile frequent flyer card. Yeah, you want that. To get that, you'd have to fly a distance equal to about 107 round trips from Earth to Pluto and back. That's 1 trillion.
Wow.
Our treasury debt is at 22 plus. It's unpayable. There's no way this thing can ever be paid down under the current monetary system. And you know the term Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff is doing 150 years for running the world's largest private Ponzi scheme at 60 billion. You do the arithmetic of 60 billion compared to 22 trillion. It's a lemonade stand. Well, what for-profit business is the US government in? None. And taxation isn't profit making, it's profit taking. Therefore, the US government, like any other national government around the world that has debt, they have no for-profit business. Therefore, they're running a Ponzi scheme. All Ponzi's eventually fail. And ours is headed towards it. In one way, because, well, like any good Ponzi, the only way you keep it going is you got to keep finding new money, new investors. Most of the world, their economies, their debt load, it's really shaky. Take Europe. Well, these are some of the biggest buyers of our treasuries. But here's the kicker. One of the most sustainable buyers of treasuries has been Social Security. You know that thing you're hoping to collect?
Yeah.
Good luck. Anyway, Social Security, either this year or next year, will go from what I call a net buyer of treasuries to a net seller. Up until now, more funds have come into the general fund for Social Security than has gone out. Going forward, it's going to be the opposite, which means all the extra that has been saved up in treasury debt is going to be sold and is not going to be redeemed, which means between now, let's say now and 2035, when all the reserves or all the extra savings in Social Security has been spent, it's going to be a constant net seller, which means the US government isn't going to have the Social Security as a buyer. Who's going to replace this buyer? And the only reason the treasury debt is, and it's cannot be paid off, but it is currently sustainable because the interest rate's so low. If the interest rate was at a proper rate, 4, 5, 6%, we'd be tap city. We'd be done. The other thing that's crazy about our monetary system in general and in the world, do you guys talk much about negative interest rates?
Yeah, that is a major issue that we've covered a lot. And so I'm definitely looking forward to get your thoughts on it. Elaborate on it for us.
Well, with negative interest rates, the baseline assumption is that money has no time value, which if that was the case, there would be absolutely no reason to save it. You spend it as fast as you get it. This was actually one of the things that happened in Germany during the Weimar Republic. There's many stories of people getting paid at noon and running out and going getting their groceries because the price would go up. That's what happens when money has no time value. Now, the other story, at that time, guys would go out drinking. I didn't know they had money to go out and get some beers, but when they did, they'd go to the bar, and all the beers they were going to buy that night, they would pay for when they got there. Because if they waited till 11, 12, the cost of the beer would go up. This is the problem with no time value to money. Negative interest rates means that you go into a bank, you put money into what you thought would be a savings account, but at the end of the day, you have to pay them. This sounds pretty crazy. No, this can't be happening. You check out Europe and the rest of the world, there are many countries that have negative interest rate bonds, which means, let's say you invest in a $1,000 bond. When you finally cash it in, you're not even getting $950. The only reason to do that is that your belief would be that you're going to get more out of that bond than what inflation would have done to ruin your purchasing power. But that to me is just crazy, negative interest rates. And they're even talking about it in the US. On the far end of this monetary system spectrum is there are countries and businesses, such as Coca-Cola. I'm not faulting these people. It's just, and there's universities that are issuing what are called century bonds. The bonds will not mature for 100 years.
Wow.
Okay, you buy one now, your grandchildren may not be around for these to clear. This shows you how out of whack the system is. Negative interest rates really tell me that all these systems, not just the US, is struggling. And that's one of the reasons why the interest rate overall is so low, because they're trying to keep money going in the system, because if it had a normal interest rate, most people would be tap city.
Right.
But negative interest rates to me is an indicator there's something seriously wrong with a monetary system.
Right. Now let's peel back some of the layers to all this craziness in our banking sector, and in regards to the whole credit expansion, the way currency is brought into existence, and it's extinguished on another end. Elaborate and give us some thoughts on that.
Most people understand, or it's not a secret, that banks create money when they fund a loan. But I'm going to stop right there and expand on this one topic. You may have heard many times that the Fed creates money or deals in money. The US government creates money or deals in money. This is absolutely 100% incorrect. Only people are businesses, and the definition of what is money doesn't say specifically, but I'll say our state governments. People and our state governments have money, and the basic term is called M1. M stands for money, 1 stands for the number 1 supply. The three main things that are in the M1 money supply are cash in circulation, coin in circulation, and electronic digits in checking accounts. Not savings, retirement, just checking accounts. They're also called demand deposit accounts. The fourth item in M1 is traveler's checks issued by non-banks, but that is such a small fraction, we just put it aside. Cash, coin in circulation, your pocket, my pocket, and and checking accounts balances. That's money. Only people have money. Banks don't have money in their own name. They have what's called reserves. Reserves are not money, money are not reserves. US government has no money in its own name. It also only has reserves. The Fed itself, when I say Fed, I mean the Federal Reserve banks, the Federal Reserve System. The Fed itself has neither money nor reserves in its own name. And that's because the Fed creates reserves. Fingertips on a keyboard, hit enter. So when people start talking about money, I get real specific as to, are you really talking about money, or are you talking about reserves, or with the Fed? Whatever the Fed does, no matter whether it acquires an asset or satisfies an expense, the Fed does one thing: it creates reserves. And you know who told me this? Your good buddy, Ben Bernanke.
Really?
In 2012, he gave 4 lectures to the students at the George Washington University School of Business. In the 4th lecture, he's talking about what the Fed did post-2008. At this time, he is the chairman of the board of governors. And he tells the students, the Fed went out and acquired $2 trillion worth of treasuries from the system. Keep in mind, the Fed cannot directly deal with the U.S. government. It can only deal with the market through brokers, dealers, and banks. So the Fed went out and got $2 trillion worth of treasuries. So for a moment, you'll be a bank. You'll be the Bank of Mike,
okay,
and I'll be the Fed. And you know I'm looking for treasuries. So you come into my office, you drop a bunch of paper on my desk, and you go, Alan, there you go. Okay, I'll be right with you. I go over to my keyboard. I open up my computerized accounting system. I make one journal entry. I hit enter. You know what I just did. I go back to you. I give you a thumbs up. You go, cool. You walk out the door. I, the Fed, acquired $2 trillion worth of treasuries with a journal entry. I increase my asset called treasuries on my balance sheet, and the offsetting credit is to your reserve account. Hit enter. I'm done. You're happy because you just sold $2 trillion worth of treasuries to me, and your reserve balance just went up. That's how the Fed works. It doesn't print. It doesn't manufacture money, even though people keep saying they do. The Fed has nothing directly to do with money. It can influence the amount of money in the supply, but it does not create it. Which means when you start reading people talking about that the Fed is creating money, they're absolutely incorrect. Only banks create money. They create money with journal entries. Now, everybody thinks that banks only create money by funding loans. Now, do you remember the TV show Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, do you remember the Replicator?
Yes, I do.
Okay, for those who don't, Captain Picard, captain of the Enterprise, he's standing in his ready room, and he goes up to his replicator. And for those who don't know, a replicator looks like a microwave oven built into a wall without a front door. And he goes up to and he says, computer, tea, Earl Grey, hot. And there you go. You get the cup, you get the saucer, you get the tea bag, you get the tea heated to perfection, has a little sip. Well, when you have a replicator, a food beverage replicator, and you can make any food or beverage item you want. And wouldn't we want to have one of those?
Yeah, we sure would.
Do you need a refrigerator, freezer, stove, oven, microwave, pantry, dishes? Of course not. You won't even need a dishwasher because you put all the stuff back in and you say, take it, and it takes it back to energy. Well, the banks have a replicator, fingertips on a keyboard. Now, do you think if you have a money replicator, you're only creating money when you fund loans? No, you don't. You create money when you acquire assets from consumers. You create money when you satisfy expenses to consumers. Note, I don't use the word pay. You and I, Mike and Alan, we pay for stuff. We go financially out of pocket. Banks just create money. Therein lies the problem.
Thanks for watching this interview. If you're enjoying content like this, feel free to become a part of the RTD community by becoming a member via Patreon. All it takes is a monthly contribution of about $5 a month for more great content such as this. Just scroll down beneath this video here and click the Patreon link, and then hit this tab right here to become a member of the team. Looking forward to bringing you more great content. Now, let's get back to this interview. Thanks. Yeah. Now speaking of which, I like the fact you're touching on just the creation of digits out of nowhere. And so I'm not sure, have you been paying attention to the whole repo market activity and the acquiring or liquefying of the banking sector through these 24-hour loans or whatnot? Touch on that
Yes.
for me.
Well, keep in mind the banks are dealing with the Fed. Now, all member banks and all the big banks are member banks have what are called reserve accounts. They're not bank accounts, they're reserve accounts. And when they need a loan from a bank or from the Fed, well, if they need a loan, let's say you're a bank and I'm a bank, and I need, because my reserves are short, and you have excess reserves. Through the Fed system, you're going to transfer some of your reserves to me. Now, my reserve level is up, I'm okay. Eventually, to satisfy you back, I'm going to have to return those reserves with a little extra. This is moving. If it was you and me as individuals, we'd be moving from one pocket to another. With banks, electronically, they're moving reserves from one account to another account. And this is all done at the Fed level, because the Bank of Mike has a reserve account at the Fed. The Bank of Allen has a reserve account at and the Fed just moves digits from one account to another. Okay. Now, let's say we're both running a little short. And so I can't borrow from you and you can't borrow from me. We go to the discount window, the overnight lending from the Fed, or some of this is happening over 2-3 week periods. Well, the Fed says, okay, guys, I'll take care of you. And they go over to the computer. And what you and I have to do is we have to give up some of our assets. And these are the assets that are not performing very well. That they don't their actual value is less than their book value. And the Fed will take these assets and give us reserves in return. And this is kind of what they did with TARP and all these other bailouts after 2008. The Fed took all this garbage assets because, well, if you looked at the true value of the asset, it was much less than what was on its books, which meant the banks were probably technically insolvent because their liabilities were greater than their assets. But what the Fed is doing, and even though they keep saying it, the Fed is not printing money. It never does. Money is never printed into existence. It's not printing money. It's not creating money. It is creating reserves. And only banks and the US government and I use this term kind of loosely, use that currency to transact business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does 100%. Now, so I'm getting a good breakdown of what's going on and how currency digits are brought into existence in the form of reserves. So that's clearly a problem because, as we started off earlier, the debt issue is linked to that. It's a reflection of all this creation of debt that would not be paid back. So we know the problems. What are some solutions? What's Alan Myers put together as possible solutions that could help give us a better, more promising future?
Well, one solution is to go screaming into a cave and closing it and just hoping it all goes away. Okay, that's not gonna be really good. You cannot fix something that is so seriously broken. You just can't do it. The only way to fix the system that we have, before I get to it, and the system is telling us how absolutely broken we are. There's 3 things out there that to me scream broken system, but they're treated as normal, necessary, everyday, nothing to look about. Inflation, federal income taxation, and national debt. These 3 things are all accepted as okay. And to me, they scream malfunctioning monetary system.
Break it down for me.
I'll get to the answer and then we can talk about those 3 if you like.
Okay.
Money creation is in the hands of banks. Only banks create our money. Well, as I said earlier, what do banks do with that replicator? They fund loans, they acquire assets, and satisfy expenses. And what does this monetary system give us? It gives us total unpayable debt. At the national level, I just did some research the other day. State pensions, these are the state pensions, not the other private or public pension, just the state pensions. Almost 1.3 trillion in debt. That's the state pensions. Some of them are almost fully funded, but a vast majority of them are under 60% funded. 3 states are under 40% funded. Then you get to the public and the private pensions other than the state pensions. Then you get to personal debt and business debt. We have nothing but debt in this system. The only way to fix this problem is to return the power and the benefit of money creation to the proper owners, we the people. And there's a way of doing it. It's somewhat of a lengthy explanation, but that's the upshot. We still need banks. I'm not anti-bank. I'm not anti-bank people. I'm not anti-bank buildings. We need banks. I just don't want them to be the creator of our money. And given that only people really use money, why aren't we in charge of it?
Great point.
Because think about this, because someone's going to come back and say, okay, Alan, you're a wackadoodle. We take the power to create money away from banks. Now what? Okay. My idea, and again, I haven't fleshed this out completely, but the general idea is the power to create money is returned to the unified benefit of the people. And the best use of that power to create money in a unified way is we fund our federal government by creating money, kind of the way banks do, which means our federal government no longer needs to tax and will no longer be able to borrow. It will get all the money it needs, all the funding it needs based on approved budgets. IRS goes away. The national debt will get paid off. And we, the people, can control the supply in such a way that we don't have inflation, loss of purchasing power.
Now, when you say we the people, you're referring to a single body, Department of Treasury, or what exactly?
No. I take this out. We've already seen, okay, the Constitution, God bless that document. That Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, gave the power over money to Congress. Well, we have seen what Congress did with that. It gave it away in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Thank you very large. Okay, we don't need to do that. No, when I say we the people, I'm thinking there's one institution. I call it the National Bank for no other better term. The National Bank is owned, controlled, directed, monitored, and reports to the people, not the government. The way we, the people, control this entity is kind of the way the Constitution originally had senators at the federal level. They're coming from the state. They were not subject to popular vote. And the number of people coming from each state to control and run and monitor this entity is up for debate. Could be 2, it could be 20, I don't care. Every state gets the same say-so in the running of this business, but the states would, and the people in each state would control their state and tell their state reps, get this done or don't come home. Now we have a much tighter control of what's happening. And when I mean reporting, I mean frequent reports. What's the money supply? Do we have inflation? What is the budget that the government is asking to be funded? You don't like things on the budget? Dial the phone, send an email. But the biggest thing that comes out of this is that no longer will we have a need or the ability for the federal government to tax us. I think this is fabulous.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, unless, of course, you really like the IRS. I didn't think so. And to the debt load, okay. And I wish I had it in front of me. Thomas Jefferson has some great quotes about this. But what has been happening especially over the last few decades, the debt load is being piled up to such an extent that it is the next generation that's really going to bear the burden of having to pay this off. But wait, it can't be paid off under the current system. This is untenable. This is unacceptable.
Yeah. Now, let me get your thoughts briefly on going back to the origins of our monetary system prior to privatized central banking, creating reserves out of nothing and all the good stuff like that. Precious metals was a part of the equation. And so gold and silver has been stores of value throughout time. Does gold and silver fit into the equation at all, in your personal opinion, or not?
For me, and I know a lot of people absolutely love and adore gold and silver, and I get it. And it has many characteristics of what makes money money. That's why it's been money for so long. If you look at the long history of precious metals throughout history, who has ruled the world? Free people or dictators and monarchs? You know the answer to that.
Right.
To me, and I'm glad you brought this up, money has many characteristics. I have a list of 12. I don't have it handy, but there's a list of 12. Most of them I've got from my research. Some I've added to myself to the list. Money, and people confuse the characteristics or attributes of money for what it does. Money does one thing, and only one thing. Excuse me. It facilitates an indirect transaction. It's what took humanity from direct barter to indirect exchanges, which meant the more and more we could do indirect transactions, the more and more people could specialize. And when they specialized, they got better at what they did, made better things, and had more. So when you talk about money, to me, the prime thing to think about is, what is its function? Now, you've heard of course, the Incans and the Inca Empire. It was one heck of a civilization for hundreds of years until it ran into Spanish rifles and their diseases. But it was a fabulous fabulous civilization. They covered quite an area. They built buildings that are still standing today out of stone. What was their money? Now remember, they had literally tons of gold and silver. In fact, they referred to gold, they had terms for gold and silver. Gold was referred to, the translation is sweat of the sun. Silver, tears of the moon. That tells me they held these metals in high esteem. Pun intended, they would not debase these metals by using them in commerce. So what did the Incas use for money? Do you know?
I do not know. Enlighten me, please. I'm curious.
Cacao beans. Now, you and I grew up, and our parents told us over and over again, money doesn't grow on trees. Except for one thing. For the Incas, it did. Cacao bean trees.
Wow.
But when we stay focused on money's function, and that we want to have a monetary system that does not have federal taxation, does not want to have inflation, and does not want to deal with a national debt, because these are the three killers of this monetary system. Now, with that as the background and the focus, let's talk about what's going to be money. If you can go out today and you got a little plastic card in your wallet, or you got, some paper with green ink on it, and you can get food, get gas, get whatever, that's money. Because the person or the business that accepted it can go out and use it again. Money facilitates indirect transactions. That's its highest and best use. It's allowed humanity to expand, to specialize. That's what's important. what is money and or how it's created is not as important as who controls the creation, who benefits from the creation, and does it get the job done? And the reason our dollar gets the job done is because we believe in it, number one. And if you go to most any place in this world today, you probably can get the job done with dollars, even though you don't have the local currency. And there's some places in this world, they rather have dollars than their own local currency. That's one heck of a piece of money.
Yeah, for now, especially as long as confidence and faith remains. And so let's as we draw towards the end of our chat, I want to get your thoughts on the future outlook on the Federal Reserve note as it is now, and based upon all the activity that's happening, repo market, QE or not QE. What's your 5-10 year thoughts on the Federal Reserve note under this current system if they continue to try to do what they're doing now with this toolkit, all this stuff that they've given us?
We don't have 10 years. I don't know if we've got 5. You have a national debt that's unpayable. You have Social Security that will run out of funds by 2035. You have state pensions and other pensions that are seriously underfunded. Yet their massive lack of underfunding is based on a stock market that is insane. If you look at price per earnings ratio today compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's huge. We're back to unsustainable. Therefore, if we do not choose to fix, and this is on us, individuals, the solution is not coming from the top tier. It's not coming from DC. It has to come from the people. Our Declaration of Independence, where did it come from? It came from the people. Constitution, where did it come from? It came from the people. Britain didn't give us our freedom. We had to go get it. Well, if we want monetary system stability, if we want to get rid of unpayable debt, if we want to have a constant, steady purchasing power of our money, we have to take the system back. If we don't, it's just a matter of time. And if you want to see what happens, you know the name Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winning economist. He has been quoted as saying, as others have, that the Fed, the Federal Reserve System, definitely caused the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Okay. You know who agreed with that statement? Your good buddy and mine, Ben Bernanke. And they're still in charge. To me, the Great Depression was a test run to see what people would do. And we've allowed more power and freedom to be taken from us and to be centralized in the government. We have to take back our monetary system. Last thing, the Fed targets 2% inflation. Inflation is more properly described for me as loss of purchasing power. In 1914, when the Fed went operational, one 1914 dollar had the purchasing power of 100 1914 pennies. Today's dollar has the purchasing power of 3 1914 pennies. And the Fed targets inflation. We got to bring this to an end. And I'm working with a group of people. We've got a website up, which you mentioned, FedEd, FEDED.us. If you type that into your search engine, the first thing that's going to pop up is FedEx. So you got to scroll down a little bit. Check us out. We're going to be constantly adding more content. And of course, I'm always looking for more speaking opportunities. This is great. I hope we can revisit a lot of specific topics in the future and really lay them out in specific detail, because once people get the basics, and it is really basic, it's not complex, we can get this done. we can fix this.
I agree. Well, Alan Myers, once again, it's been great having you join us here and looking forward to continue to follow your work, and definitely all the information you share, I'll put it beneath this video here so people can find out more. And other than that, I definitely look forward to connecting again as things unwind and get your thoughts on where we're at that point in time. But once again, it's been great having you on the show and connecting again. So I appreciate you joining us.
Michael, this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you for the opportunity to have the chat and share information, and I look forward to many more chats.